Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of 100 Days and Beyond. Today we've got a wow. If I look at your bio on LinkedIn, Karen, I think it's just unbelievable. So there's so many things to pick on today. I want to maybe go through a process of sort of unpacking some of your items, but let's just quickly cover who's the audience. So as part of an introduction to 100 Days and Beyond, the podcast for M&A professionals, mergers, acquisitions, post-merger integration practitioners, all the way through to individuals and companies that do acquisitions or buy other companies. And from an audience perspective, we generally have three groups. The one group are people that come in and they almost get forced into it. So they show really good acumen in terms of project management, the ability to work with businesses and so on, or they work with a division or a unit within a company, and then they get pushed into the IMO or the Integration Management Office, or they get told, hey, we've just bought a company, you better get on with it. And so they get either forced into it or it's a career choice. So it's somebody moving into it from a new perspective. We also have individuals like yourself that are highly experienced in the people, and I really, I mean, your experience is incredible. So I'm going to go through that now, and I think it's a really good example of a practitioner that's reached a really high level in terms of your career and that, and then on the back end, we also from time to time speak to those who have been targeted. In other words, they work within entities that get acquired. So these are the people that have to almost take their day job and add a bit extra because now someone has gone and acquired the company and they have to do some extra work. And sometimes those pressures can be quite, I think, quite daunting, especially in the early stages. But Karen, I'm going to come to you. So Karen Thomas Bland, we've got founder of Seven, and we have to talk about that. Leading value creation through strategic transformation, interim chief transformation officer, interim M&A integration director, non-executive director, and chair. I mean, you've done quite a lot of different things, and I just want to go through just like maybe one or two sentences there. You talk about being an interim executive committee member, consultant, NED, which is a non-executive director with 25 years experience leading complex enterprise-wide transformations and M&A integrations. And then there's this massive number, $105 billion for integrations for up to $105 billion in turnover. I mean, that's massive. You worked with Microsoft, Invesco, National Grid, several PE funds, etc. And I mean, it's an amazing CV. And if I just keep going, I'll probably take up the full hour. Karen, thank you. Welcome to our show today.
Oh, great to be here, Dudley. My absolute pleasure.
Excellent, thank you. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about how does one sort of start off? I mean, did in your school days or when you started your career, you said, that's what I want to be. I want to be that, whatever. I don't know how to summarize it because you move into transformations and M&A, NED, chairs, and so on. So tell us a bit about that journey. How did you decide this is sort of almost your calling, your space that you live in?
Yeah, no, it's great question, Dudley. I originally set out to be an organisational psychologist. So that was my goal, if you like, age about 12, 13. That literally was my mission to do that. And so I trained for 6 years as both a psychologist and then specialising in organisational psychology. And that for me was the perfect blend of both business, but also the people side of a business as well. And what are some of the challenges? And so that took me into an early career in management consultancy, but specialising around the people aspects of an M&A, assessment, development, team building, change management. So any element of a business that touched people, I was working with lots of different organizations, in essence, to work with them to solve their people challenges. And I recognized, pretty early on that I wanted to be broader than just people. And so I transitioned then to working on sort of broader transformations, broader integrations, not just from a people perspective, but from a process, a technology, and so on. So it was the entire organization. I did that for several years, became partner in a big consultancy business. And then I went into IBM, and I went into IBM really to lead a business, running businesses, but also integrated businesses. So we were buying relatively early stage software companies to grow inorganically for a period. So a really interesting experience. As I've lived in New York, I've lived in Dubai, I've lived in Sao Paulo, so I've got the international experience as well. And then what I did 12 years ago now was left that world to set up on my own. And so my world over the last 12 years has been threefold, really. One, it's been going into large listed businesses who are about to embark on a transformation or integration. So the scenario will be they're buying something bigger or more complex than they've ever bought before, or they've declared wanting to go on a transformation journey, perhaps thought about some of the KPIs, but need someone to come in on a fractional or interim basis to lead that. So that's been one sort of thrust. The second one has been, I have a background in private equity as well. And so often I take non-exec or chair roles in private equity-backed businesses, either being brought in by the private equity fund or through the management team. And those roles have been really about value creation, i.e. working with that business towards some form of financial event. We will be acquiring businesses potentially as well, and done that. And it's working with the management team and the investor to get the outcomes that they desire. And then purely for fun, I invest in early stage businesses, always a risk, but always a lot of fun. And putting time and money into those if I think they've got sort of potential to scale. And that for me brings in my passion, which is about, yes, we're making a profit, but there would need to be some purpose to it. So the investments I make are in businesses that have a positive impact in the world. So those are the three things that I've done over the last 12 years.
Yeah. So what really strikes me when having a chat to you a few times prior to the podcast today is I would say a level of confidence that you have that's special, and I think that's really brilliant in the way that you present yourself. You know your stuff, and you're clearly a very hardworking individual. You spent your life dedicated to this specific arena, and if I look at that journey, I mean, organizational psychology. How does one, when you in your early career, decide organizational psychology is what I want to get into? Because I see I think you've done some thesis work around that too. So if we look at on the educational side, I see you did an MSc in organizational psychology, you did the BSc in psychology, and then you went into into business, where you are right now. I mean, it's quite an interesting space because you get to, I think and part of that thing that sort of stands out for me is your ability to be in multiple places and being able to do that kind of work where you're able to focus, get that work done, although there might be 2 or 3 other projects lying on your desk, and that stood out for me. I mean, is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, you're probably tapping into something, Dudley, about being easily bored. I like quite a full plate, and I like a lot of different things going on, and I like a lot of plates spinning. So it's probably quite deliberate for me that I choose highly complex, really difficult jobs, and I want a number of things on the go. I think you're tapping into, a fundamental personality trait there of really enjoying that variety and enjoying that complexity. I don't seek an easy life. I don't seek those easy business as usual, if they exist even anymore. But I like that complexity. I like being in new territory or covering sort of new ground. I like to challenge myself.
Yeah, and besides the career, and I've also just looked at some of the publications, some of the articles you've actually published. You've got a podcast talking business transformation that you talk about, and so on. And so you not only work within the organizations, but you also find time and the energy to go and write articles and so on. It's fascinating. I look at it, so post-pandemic business transformation, what has changed? Embarking on a digital transformation, why your ambition must be bolder and more courageous. I mean, I'm absolutely loving those titles. How to avoid technology being an afterthought in an M&A deal. Tackling the great resignation. Are you a leader people want to work for? Which is another a really good question. And obviously, the talking business transformation is it really is interesting to see how you manage to keep those plates juggling, but also full.
Well, I love writing. Again, you've stumbled into a passion of mine, which is secretly I am a writer. I love writing, and perhaps I always think about pivots, and I can certainly imagine at the end stages of career. Writing. I'm in the process of writing a book at the moment. So I love that. And it also, for me, the benefit of writing is it gives me clarity, but it also enables me to think about, what's been done, what's been delivered, how can I capture sort of the lessons learned that I can use in the next sort of engagement. So it actually does help the day job that I'm processing this information, and being able to talk about it on podcasts or be able to write about it in an article, for me, is about cementing, sort of learnings.
Yeah, and I've got to say that if I have a look at some of the things that you get involved in, but that choice, tell me about that choice that you took some 10, 11 years ago, when you decided not to be employed, but to rather go out on your own. That's an interesting shift, because it's almost like what people are doing now. You did that some years back, where there was a time when being employed was probably more, I don't know if in vogue is the right word, but it was more, people tended to work for big PE firms or corporate acquirers and so on, and be part of teams. And if you were fractional or interim, you took on one or two projects and then just sort of waited till that one was finished and then looked for the next one.
Yeah.
And tell us, how did you get to the point where you had all this work and that, and then you decided, look, hey, I'm going to do this on my own. Tell us about what went on.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't in vogue at that point. So I don't think the gig economy had actually been talked about. So it's interesting. But I thought there was an opportunity, and I thought, I don't necessarily want to go back into a large consultancy, but I do want to do these big projects. Can I do that on my own? And can I build enough of a network around me so that I'm not hiring people, but I'm using great people who might also be interested in the independent journey? I should also say, on a personal level, I was living in Brazil and wanting to relocate back to the UK, as family was getting older, and it was probably a little bit more necessary to be, in the UK and in easy access of mum and others. So it all came together, really. It was where I could see the market perhaps going, and the fact that I thought, interims, fractional executives, consultants probably can start operating on a more individual basis. And secondly, yeah, through, just family and what was going on there, I wanted to come back to the UK. And so I took the brave decision. I got my first client and I got a non-exec role. And I thought, let's just build from here. Let's see where it goes. So at that time, I didn't set up a website and everything I've got now. I just thought, let's test it out. It's low risk. If it doesn't work, I'll obviously go back to being traditionally employed. But no, 12 years on, best decision, right timing. Don't regret any of what happened before. It was absolutely essential to build, my capability and ability as a leader. But now, very comfortable because it gives you freedom, flexibility, choice.
Yeah, I'm loving that, and just around that, the change in technology, because you do talk. I mean, one of the articles you wrote about sort of how to avoid technology being an afterthought in M&A deals. Tell me, sort of, in starting your own practice, I mean, you said that the website came later on, and so on, and the adoption of technology to try and make your sort of streamline your day-to-day activities, because being on your own, there are often a few additional things that you wouldn't have to do if you were part of a larger organization. Sort of, how did that? Did you grow into sort of a system that works for you?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, Dudley. It's evolved over time, I would say. I've become my own social media manager, as you say, publishing thought leadership and getting myself out there and getting known. And that wasn't the case in the beginning. That was something I thought, let me build up to over time. I've absolutely done that in large organizations. So I suppose I had the large organization model in my mind, which is, what are all the elements I need to manage? There's certain things I did right from the get-go. One was get an accountant. I'm not going to spend my time looking at spreadsheets and inputting data. It's not, what brings me joy, which is one of my criteria. So absolutely, like, get an accountant, be clear on what your value proposition is. And when you're out talking to people, just know what it is and be able to articulate that. There were some things I absolutely did in the beginning. I also found a network, so tapped into people who were either operating like I did, or in sort of a quasi way, doing some form of kind of consultancy off the back of perhaps something else. And so tapping into that network, because the one thing you immediately realize that you miss is, of course, in a large organization, you've got lots of people to talk to, and I'm a natural person who likes to talk and collaborate with people. I'm not someone who wants to be at home, poring over a computer screen all the time. So I did build a network in the beginning. And for me, that was critical in order to have that same, bouncing ideas off people, collaborating, saying, just what do you think about this or this? That was really important to me. So I think the network, getting the financials kind of managed. There was a few things I put in place, but actually it was over time that I thought, right, I need to now up my PR game. I need to start writing more articles. I need a professional, sort of website. So things grow. You don't need to have to do everything in the beginning.
Yeah, thankfully for that, but it could be overwhelming. I'm just thinking about people that are getting into fractional and interim roles now, and I mean, even one of your articles, you talk about this sort of the great resignation, where people are saying, what do I do next? I want to have a bit more meaning. I want to have a bit more purpose. I actually want to do my own thing, whatever that means. For everybody, it's probably slightly different. But how do you manage? Because I've done, if I look at my career, I've had multiple clients over the years, and often many at one particular time. And it's how do you deal with the sort of almost that conflict, if you like, not a conflict, but it's sort of an internal process of where do you put your priorities? I mean, it's quite an interesting thing when you have sometimes, I don't know if you can call it Murphy's Law, but sometimes all of a sudden 3 projects are due, or you're starting off 3 new projects at the same time. It's not a perfect world, this, is it? I mean, it's not like, oh, it's perfectly timed. You start a new one next month and the one after, and it just sort of falls into place. How do Tell us a bit about how you do your prioritizing and juggling and so on, because that's always fascinating to me in this sort of space.
Yeah, I'm laughing, Dudley, because you're right. I don't think there's a perfect recipe here. I think you've got to be comfortable. If you're working in this kind of portfolio fractional way, you've got to be comfortable with peaks and troughs. That's the first thing I would say, and really take advantage of those troughs. So I love traveling, and I do that a lot. Obviously not during COVID times. So plan accordingly. When you've got downtime, really take advantage of it and really indulge whatever your passion might be. And for me, that will often be, traveling to different countries. But I would also say, yeah, in those peak moments, you are going fast and you're going hard and you're working, pretty long hours, and you're pulling everything to pull out all the stops. And so I will make it my 100% focus. I will work long hours. I will work over the weekends. It's not for everybody, but I do that knowing that I will have a drop off, and therefore I can go and take that rest period that you need, and then I can come back. But I am a pretty, hard hitting, motivated person. I will do whatever, mine will do whatever it takes, and I won't ask anyone to do what I wouldn't do myself. So I'm pretty hands-on, and I will go pretty hard and fast, and I'll work long days, and particularly in, like, as you know, a deal environment, you can't get away from that. So it's going pretty hard on for a good period of time. But I kind of, my personality, I kind of love that. I love the peak and the trough of it, and so it works for me. But I do acknowledge, and many of my network will say the same, it's not for everybody. It's not.
Yeah, and I think what you've done is you've also found your purpose and your calling, and I think that's what's really makes it special. And a number of people I've spoken to in this community, it seems they find their happy place almost in a chaotic world, in a chaotic niche. It is like that. I mean, if you get called to let's call it teaching or nursing or something like that, I think often being a practitioner, and a true practitioner, is often a calling. It's not something, it's not a hobby. It's not something you do in the pastime. It's not a side hustle, as some people call it. It's an actual, it's proper. And the other thing is that you've got so many people relying on you. You've got many people relying on you delivering, because you often, I would, from your bio and that, you would go in from a leadership position. So people look up to you. You have to lead from the front. You have to show the energy. You got to show the drive. You got to show that you know where you're going, and you almost can't be doubtful in any of your actions and discussions. You've got to be organized. You've got to be engaging. You've got to be able to balance between telling people what to do and getting their input. I'm loving those kind of conversations, and I'm sure you have quite a few of those where you would have to do that. And I imagine going in as an NED in a chair. Tell us a bit about that. So now you go in not just as a practitioner, but now you get, let's say you get a non-exec role, or let's say you go in as a chair. Give us an example, or give us a bit of an anecdote around that dynamic difference between chair, which is all non-exec, all the way down into the executive role. How do you get that engagement going between, let's say, chair and CEO, or chair and outgoing management? I don't know. Just give us a few anecdotes around that, or a few examples.
Yeah, it's a really great question, Dudley. I mean, I focus on the private equity world from a non-exec and chair perspective, and I'd say it is different. So for those of you interested in board roles, I'd say if you're really interested in value creation, then private equity is probably a market to really kind of explore, because the listed world, clearly governance is the priority. Now, in a private equity, of course, governance is important, but actually it does lend itself quite well to people who are orientated towards transformation, because you've tend to got an outcome. You're working towards some form of exit. That might be another PE house coming in, that might be a trade sale, might be a management buyout, but there's a clear kind of goal that you're working towards. You're right, Dudley. I mean, building a relationship, whether you're a non-exec or whether you're chair, the relationship that you have to the CEO and the broader management team is absolutely critical. And that will be my entry point, to really get to know these guys and really understand what it is. So a lot of the CEOs in that scenario I work with will be founder CEOs. They will have built that business. It will be their baby. They'll have got private equity investment, having bootstrapped this business and, you know, built it over a long period of time. And so you have to operate with sensitivity to that. And you really need to understand, you know, what their personal motivation is, what their passion is, what a great outcome looks like for them, and then how can you support them to achieve that. But it's similar to a transformation and being hands-on, in that you've got an outcome, you know, you're all working towards that. And so what are the building blocks that you need to put in place? How do you see the business evolving from a people perspective as you grow up? You know, how do you make sure you've got the right processes, the right technology that's going to support that scale up journey? And ultimately, how do you bring people with you? Because often the business might be going from 100 people to 1,000 people in quite a short period of time. And so from a culture perspective, often where you can help the CEO is on that scale up journey. Just how do we create that or keep that same entrepreneurial culture, but recognize we do need to bring in more formalities, more processes, because simply you can't do anything else if you want to scale. But it's interesting. I like the balance of that entrepreneurial business with the listed space. And I think there are lessons, you know, to learn on both sides to cross-pollinate.
Yeah, and I want to try and just bring in your psychology background briefly, because there seems to be, and I you know, this is just an observation. You know, it's not a broad brushstroke saying everyone's doing this, but there seems to be a tendency now, which I'm enjoying, and that's I would say an emphasis on strengths as opposed to weaknesses. Now, I remember when I was at school, you know, you take home your report card, and the one subject that you didn't quite enjoy, you didn't do as well, that was the one that your parents sort of said, what's going on over there? And all the other ones were not really, that's great, that's what we were expecting, but you know, this one, there's something wrong. It's almost the other way around. If you want to run a really good company, you've got to try and look for the strengths in the individuals, look for where they could add the most value, look where and how you could help them identify where their strengths are. So these sort of strengths finding type of tests and other types of engagements that you do. Do you think that's important from a psychologist type of point of view?
Yeah, Dudley, I definitely do. But I'm with you a little bit on but we can't forget what the gaps are. So I'm a big advocate of strengths methodology. I think saying to people, what are you really good at? And let's use that as a sort of point on which you can think about what do you want to do? What's your career? What's your end game? What's your purpose? I think makes absolute sense. When it comes to a business, I think I'm a bit more sort of what are the strengths, but also what are the gaps to close, and how do we fill in those gaps? It's not just about sort of playing to strengths. It's about saying, what are we not so good at? Because within that, there's learning for me. There's, if we're not good at something, how do we build muscle in it? How do we get better at it from an individual or an organization perspective? So I come at this from both sides. I think strengths, absolutely, let's play to those, but let's not be so focused on that we ignore the gaps, right? That might trip us up and you know, be our Achilles heel that we don't know about down the line. So I think it's important as well to be saying, it's a bit like you said around the scorecard that we had at school, but now we have a balanced scorecard in businesses. It's important to have that honest view. And I often talk to organizations that would be a conversation I have, whether I'm going in as a NED, whether I go in as a, you know, a transformation or an integration exec, just where are the issues? Where are the problems? Where have we not shown up particularly well in the past? Where can we be better? And then what's the plan to build that? And how can we bring the right capability, support, and whatever we need around us? Otherwise, I think you're sailing blind towards, just being focused on strengths.
Yeah, so there's definitely a need to be able to almost call a spade a spade. You know, if to use a really old cliche, but you know, I think there is time to say, look, things are wrong. Let's fix this. But many things are fixable if you apply the right sort of principles and tools, and obviously with your experience and knowledge, you can pretty much do that. So, no, thank you. That was a great answer. I want to touch on sort of, you talk about leading value creation through strategic transformation, but there's a title. You talk about being an interim chief transformation officer. Now, tell me about that title. How does that sort of come about, and how do you act as a can you call it a CTO? Is that right?
As long as they don't mistake it from a chief technology officer, which I've quickly become and stop. Yes, absolutely. I think that role came about. I think McKinsey was probably the first organization to term it as kind of C-suite role. And I think it came about because there was no real middle ground. So if you were embarking on a transformation, your low risk approach is to go to a MBB firm, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, one of the big four, you know, find a consultancy, bring them in essence, you know, let them run the transformation for you. The other option was you do it yourself, you do it in-house. And clearly, you know, if you've not been on that transformation journey before, that's a pretty high risk stakes move, because you have no examples, experiences, anecdotes, lessons learned that can guide you across the journey, and perhaps you don't know the recipe. So you add these two kind of extremes, whereas there's a middle ground which says, I do need to bring in some independent expertise, but I don't want the change to be done to us by a consultancy. I actually want skin in the game. And at that point, people think about bringing in an interim transformation officer or transformation director. And it's what a lot of the big firms, you know, you can go to McKinsey, you can go to Alvarez and Marsal, and you can buy from them those people. They even change their model to be able to. But then there's a group of people who do that on an independent basis, and I'm one of those. And it's typically when a chief executive says, I want to transform the business, and they may have even done that first bit of work that says, this is what we want to transform it to, or they're still early stage and still saying, I know I want to change these dynamics. I want to change the health of the organization. I want to change the financial trajectory, but they don't know how. And so it's going into an organization, being part of the executive team, and basically working with them on that journey, which is both a recipe, a process to follow, you know, setting up a transformation office, having a regular drumbeat, but then it's also getting into the nitty gritty. So, you know, like what I'm working on at the moment, they want to set up things like centers of excellence. They want to set up a new model around account management. It's then getting into the nitty gritty and delivering what they've set out that they want to achieve, but doing it in a way where you're not around forever, which is the right mentality of a transformation. I know some organizations say we're always transforming. Well, it's right that you're always changing and evolving, but a transformation should have a defined endpoint with a set of KPIs that you want to deliver. Otherwise, it will peter out. So those roles, you know, you go in, you might be in there for 18 months, couple of years, basically to deliver that. But the importance and the difference of working with, you know, an interim versus a consultancy is they're working with you. They're taking you on the journey, but they're leaving you with that capability and that sustainability that, you know, perhaps next time you will do more of it yourself.
Yeah, I want to bring in sort of a case study example, and maybe you've got more localized ones. But if I look at sort of a transformation as a topic, so you have somebody somewhere that says, hey, we need to transform as an organization, and often it's triggered by something like a competitor behavior. It could be the shifting of a market, so customers are buying elsewhere or have stopped using, or the complaints have gone up. I don't know, whatever the trigger is, and then then people start talking transformation. And often transformation, in my mind, sometimes is very difficult to define.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be transformed? And I really enjoy the fact that you what you mentioned now is that a transformation, a journey, even if it's through a post-merger integration or a post-acquisition or whatever it is, it has to have a start, a middle, and an end. It's got to be viewed as a project, because you can't. It's like training for an event. If you're an athlete, you can't always be training. You've got to select your event. You've got to go through a process of building up and then peaking at the right time so that you can be at your best performance at the event. And it's a bit like that to a certain extent, although I suppose you do the event and then you sort of do the handover or whatever it is, and then you move on. Just tell us a little bit about, I mean, I'm just trying to use an analogy, but if I say Macy's, for instance, they saw in the States, I mean, that they saw things are changing. I mean, I think one of the biggest retail department stores, and they saw, okay, well, you know, there's all of a sudden there's a lot more competition, and they say, we need to transform. Okay, let's bring in a transformation officer. And it's like, and then all these new ideas come in, like you have to use better technology, you've got to engage your clients or your customers more, you've got to get better feedback, you've got to improve your reputation management, and a whole lot of other things. And you have to then sort of serve a different audience and so on. So there's a gazillion, like, let's call it transformation touch points. So, I mean, how do you, you know, that thing is like, hey, Karen, come and do a transformation for us. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, we're laughing. It's one of those challenges, isn't it, where you know, there's everything on the table. But I suppose I get involved in a couple of different points. There might be organisations, and I'm thinking of one, that had done really no thinking about it. So they'd said, we want to go to transformation. We want to change up our revenue. We want bigger margins. They tend to describe it in relatively in financial terms. They may also describe wanting to evolve their population of people and upgrade that and upgrade their technology and sort of streamline processes and so on and so forth. So they've got some idea, but it's often then about going in and asking that question, you know, 3 years from now, 2 years from now, where do you want to be? How will you know you've got there? And what does it really look and feel like? What would you be different? What would you be saying that's different? What would be the narrative? So it's getting them to really describe that end state in the best possible detail, so you know what you're aiming for. And for people, that's important, because then they go, I know why we want to transform, because I can understand, as you say, there's been a major market shift. Our competitors have done this, they've all gone online, they've rechanged their business model, they're now having SaaS businesses. So there's all sorts of reasons that can trigger that transformation. But the first thing with the client is to say, where do you want to get to? And then there's a project element, which is, we just need, because we've got a lot of stuff in the pot, we've got to do that in a way that's going to make it feel organized. So let's have work streams, one looking at people and culture, one looking at process, and, you know, and so on. So you've got it in a manageable form, and you can hold people to account. The other thing is being a bit provocative, I guess, with the organization and saying, are you really being ambitious enough? It's an interesting concept, transformation, because if you think about it, McKinsey will often say, well, 70% of transformations fail. And so you're like, well, why would anyone ever embark on one if I've only got a 30% chance? I think where that statistic probably came from is people not really defining that endpoint, and actually it just got kicked down the road. And so they kicked off another transformation, and actually there was never an endpoint to measure success on. And so in a way, and where I'm a big fan, I always have a worry when organizations say, but we're always on a transformation. No, you're always changing and evolving, because that's like being an organic, you know, organization, and nothing stays the same. But when you're embarking on a transformation, define your end state, define your KPIs, make sure the board's holding you to account for those, and work towards it in a planned way. You're right, there's so much activity often going on, but managing it through work streams, through having a transformation office or an integration management office if it's in an M&A context, and use that to keep the drumbeat and keeping clear, are we on track? Are we delivering? Have we got the sequence and pace of this change right? So building those checker points to see, are we really achieving what we set out to, and doing it in a planned and methodical way. It sounds straightforward. There is a recipe. I can tell you on every one I've ever done, there will always be something that goes wrong, something not expected, a failure that you didn't expect to happen. It's all par for the course, though. You know, honestly, if you're not failing, you're probably not pushing hard enough.
Yeah, and I absolutely love what you said there. Is sometimes challenging the board or whoever the management are and saying, you know, is it transformation potentially for the sake of change? But are you thinking big enough? Are you challenging yourself in terms of the transformation enough? I'm guessing it's also psychology. It's about achieving a bigger goal tends to stretch people some more, tends to stretch their imaginations, and also gets them engaged in being inspired almost to achieve the transformation. If it's a small little transformation, it's like, yeah, it's all nice.
Exactly that. Then I put it in the bucket of, it's change that we need to do, but it's not fundamentally transforming the business. And that's absolutely fine. An organization will go through tons of changes and have a process and a methodology and a way of managing that, but recognize that that's very different from embarking on a transformation that you will often commit to the city. If you're a public company, your board will be holding you to account. This is something, you know, you're committing to going on this journey, and it's a brave step, and that's why it's sometimes helpful to have people not in the organization being around the table with you saying, oh, have you thought about this? What about this? Let's look at these examples. Let's draw on another sector, because, you know, innovation might not just come from within your sector. It's sometimes important to go outside, like it is with a board. So you need that provocation, and you need that big ambition that everyone gets excited about. Everyone sees a journey, and people genuinely feel excited and want to go on it. They recognize it's hard. It's a bit like training for a marathon, or, you know, you recognize it's hard, but the reward will be there, and you've got to prepare for it.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to, as I mean, the hour's going so quick, and we only got a few minutes left, and I want to focus a little bit more on Seven Transformation, which is your entity that you created. And I'm guessing, and I'm looking at your website right now, and I'm seeing what I think are the seven. So is it grow, disrupt, adapt, acquire, merge, diversify, and restructure? Yes,
exactly that. So I built the name. Well, actually, I should confess that I worked with a branding agency to actually help me brand the business. I did not do all of that. I wrote much of the content, but I needed those visualization skills. So I worked with a branding partner to bring it to life. But you're right, those are the seven.
Yeah, so the seven, I mean, that's very interesting. So just calling yourself Seven Transformation. So there must be a reason. I'm hoping I'm not sort of putting you on the spot, but tell us sort of if you can, where it came from, and how you selected those seven, because grow is one thing, disrupt is something else, adapt, acquire, merge, diversify, that I can sort of understand. Acquire and merge and diversify, I can understand. Restructure is probably in the vein of sort of transformation, if you like. But sort of grow, disrupt, adapt. Tell us a little bit about those seven, and sort of why seven, and how did you get about it? I know it's an agency and so on, but you must have had something inside you that drove you to that.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. There's a couple of sevens in there. So one, actually, why I was interested in seven is I put all my case studies of clients that I'd worked with over 25 years on the table and said, what are some of the themes? And so naturally, if I think about entry points, some came from a point of view of saying, I just want to grow and scale this business. Some came from, I'm buying a business, it's already a done deal, just come in and integrate it. So I was thinking about the words that clients used when they wanted, to basically use me or use my services. But Seven also came from a different place, which is when you look at the transformation or integration market and you say who's playing in it, they'll tend to come at it from one specific perspective. So they'll tend to come at it from a strong financial perspective. A lot of the big consultancies will have that as their main lever, or they tend to come at it from a process perspective, or if you're orientated on the people and culture side. And so I wanted to emphasize that this is not coming at it from any one perspective. There's at least 7 dimensions. There's people and process, there's culture, there's technology, there's processes. And it's actually the real value in transformation is about integrating all of those, whether you're doing a deal, whether you're doing an operating model transformation, thinking about it from those multiple perspectives. And when you're designing and sequencing the change, making sure you're not losing any one of those and not just owning it from one. So I wanted to emphasize that multi-dimension, that I wasn't going to come in at this from any one particular perspective. I was going to look at the whole picture and say, how does it play out? And if I think about competitors of consultancies and others, they do tend to come at it, even though they will say, it's relatively broad, they will have a natural bias given their background to one or more of those. And I feel the benefit is to look at it from all perspectives.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I mean, you're absolutely right, and it does succinctly put that together in terms of the different entry points. I want to touch on one more thing, and then I want you to share sort of how people can get hold of you. But I just want to in your LinkedIn bio, you talk about private equity backed boards where you've been involved in. And then you talk about sort of drive the value creation. So that I can understand in terms of post-merger integration, post-acquisition integration, and you've got a private equity-backed firm. Part of their process is value creation. They want to have an entity they can exit as soon as possible at the highest possible multiple, within whatever their scope is in terms of their brief and that. So that I can understand. So there's drive value creation. Then you've got the second part there, which is achieve major fundraising within that space. So part of the drive and the growth, sometimes you need additional working capital. You need additional funding and so on to make sure that you can have a plan. But if you can't fund the plan, sometimes that just goes to naught. And then in addition to that, you then talk about the exit. Okay, so probably getting ready for exit and making sure that I don't like to use the word, but it's almost like window dressing. You want to get everything in the right sort of view so that all the right things on the right places and all the tick boxes are ticked for the next acquirer, so that when they walk in, it's not that you still got to go and look for the information. You've actually got everything ready. So you almost, while you're doing the value creation, you've got to be thinking about exit, but you also got to be keeping funders happy, and you've got to be raising further capital. So just, as we go through almost to the end of the hour now, and just so tell us about that dynamic, because for me, often it could be conflicting dynamics, but it could also be joy. So it is a very interesting dynamic. Tell us about how you deal with that scenario.
Yeah, Dudley, it's a great question, because I've worked in all scenarios. I've worked in a tense scenarios where the investors are, you've got different investors, as you know. You've got people who just want to exit, get the multiple. They don't really care about the path, and they're less on the value creation side. And then you've got investors, which is probably my preferred, but there's benefits of both, which is, we really want to think about this in a very conscious way, in a very thoughtful way, and how do we create value. So one of the roles, and particularly a role I play as a NED and a chair, will be managing that investor landscape, making sure the current investors feel like what they're getting. So I will always advocate the investor having a role on the board, even if that's just an observer role, but actually giving them a full, sort of board role is always, I think, a good thing, and particularly if they lean towards that value creation side because they're part of it. So involvement, absolutely. As you say, making sure you almost have like a continuous deal room, as you'll know from an M&A, which is, let's make sure we keep all the information because we've just been through DD. Let's make sure we have an open deal room where we store all the key documents, and so that we're very open and transparent to current investors. And then it's a deliberate process. It is, when you're looking for new investment, it is almost like going on a transformation, because you need to build the strategy of the business to tell the story to potential investors so they can see what you're doing, but they can see where the real opportunities are. A lot of the businesses I work with, let's say, will have a core business. Let's say it's, typical management consultancy, but they'll have a SaaS business opportunity based on the data that they've built in order to be able to spin that out. So for the new investors coming in, you need to be able to tell them that security about a core business, but actually the opportunity. But there will always be challenging investors, and I've been on boards where the investors have really held the management team and the board to task around, why have you done this, what have you done? And so my approach is always about engagement, involvement, communication, making sure everyone's clear, making sure everyone's bought in, but also actively asking them to help and input and shape, because clearly they have perspectives, they have lots of other businesses typically in their portfolio and lessons to learn from that. So a lot of it is, again, the same change principles, whether you're doing a transformation, whether you're on a board, whether you're doing an integration. It's all are we communicating? Are we giving enough information? Do people feel like they're involved and included, not just on a fractional basis, but actually feel like they're part of the journey and feel they've got skin in the game and they want to make it happen. So I'm all about creating that culture that we're all in this together. Let's make it work. Let's see an end point. Let's align on that. And let's have those, I'm not afraid to put difficult things on the table, or indeed have some contentious conversations, because out of it often is the best value. We get to a solution. So let's kick things around. But you're right, there is always this tension of investor kind of management team that, is a careful one to balance and manage. But it comes down to relationships and that openness and transparency.
That's a really good answer to my almost a curveball question. But Karen, we're near the end of the hour, and I just want to sort of just spin into about you and sort of, yes, you work incredibly hard in that. I mean, is there such a thing as a work-life balance and so on? And once you've sort of just given us your view on that, so just sort of share with everyone, how can they get hold of you if they want to work with you? How do they find out more about you and so on?
Yeah, let me answer the work-life balance question first. So the answer is absolutely yes. There is definitely a work-life balance. I live in Marylebone in London, and so most mornings you'll find me in Regent's Park, and that's important for me. I like that early morning walk. I might listen to a podcast or two, but I need that kind of space. And then I will always be planning in, a weekend away, a holiday, something to look forward to, having, relationships with friends and family. So work-life balance, super important. And I would absolutely role model that to my team, and particularly on deal teams where we might get in at 7 and leave at 11. That's not abnormal. But what I'll be saying to people is, make sure you're taking time to replenish yourself, go for a run, do whatever it is that you do that gets your head back in the space, because we will be going fast. And so I actively make that part of the teams that I'm leading. And of course, I'm role modeling that. I wouldn't be saying do it and not doing that self, and just being very open and having, you create a culture where people can just raise their hand and say, today I'm just not, my head's not in it, I need a bit more space. That's absolutely fine. You create that culture of honesty and people being able to raise their hand and not being penalized in any way. So really, really important, fundamental. If you want to reach me, of course, I love collaborating. So you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. I post at least a couple of times a week. My website is seventransformation.com. Again, you can find a little bit about my approach, but there's also a few tools on there and an article. So hopefully some lessons in there somewhere. And I'm also on Twitter. I tweet every so often as well, linked to my LinkedIn articles. But no, I love to collaborate, and I'm always happy just to jump on a call with people, not for any commercial gain for me, but just, if there's a problem people are wrestling with and you just want to take time out, because I do that and I find it super, helpful. So no, I'm very collaborative, love to chat and help wherever I can.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just say thank you. Absolutely brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed that podcast episode. I certainly hope that you can join us again sometime in the future. Maybe next time we cover 1 or 2 case studies and so on. But it's been great getting to know you in this process, and also you sharing some of your thoughts and ideas. I really enjoyed that. Please stay on the line. I was going to say goodbye to our audience, and then I'll be straight back with you now. Right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of 100 Days and Beyond. Really the podcast that works with and speaks to and helps promote the fraternity, the mergers and acquisitions environment, the transformation specialists, as we saw today, the post-merger integration or the change agents or the change catalyst agents, if you like, that help entities make those significant changes. I love the way that Karen approaches things, and I like those 7 elements on her websites, and also just you can see the work ethic, the very direct nature, the clarity that Karen is able to bring, and it just sort of stands out for me as Karen being probably a true leader in this space, and the confidence that she exudes. So please have a look. We didn't even cover half or even a quarter of her bio on LinkedIn. Have a look at it on LinkedIn. Get in touch with her if you'd like. But I just want to say thank you to you for joining us today. Thanks to Karen for sharing her information and some part of her life and that. Please join us on our next episode of 100 Days and Beyond. And all the best, and happy hunting, and do that value creation and all the special things that the fraternity does. See you next time.